For our first 5-minute drawing exercise today, we have a rather cheeky bird, the Australian magpie. Now, I always find birds fairly challenging because they are quite small and they're quite complex because they have feathers that obviously have a certain direction to them, but they also have a form that's not always really easy to see. The feathers don't always cast straightforward shadows. And we're also used to thinking of birds by their silhouette lines, partly because they are so small. And yet, to draw a bird successfully, as I think with most things, we really need to consider the form that we're looking at, the three-dimensional roundedness. If we want to get a shape that credibly looks like this bird from this perspective angle, which of course is a further complication, then we really need to work hard to consider how exactly is this looking in 3 dimensions, particularly when we have a lot of blank colour. It can make it even harder to see the form, so we really have to work hard to observe exactly what we can see and what sense of form we get from whatever indications of light and darker values that we have. And particularly in some of these underneath parts and in the front part of the head, it is quite tricky to get a sense of what's happening. I decided to put some hatch lines on now to give me a stronger sense of the 3 dimensions and of the proportions of those 3 dimensions, and then I can try and work out exactly what I'm doing with the head. Now I'm trying to give a sense of surface shape, form with my hatch lines. It is difficult with a bird to know which way to send the lines, but I've decided to focus the roundedness of the body and then work up to the planes of the head. Now the head does have a number of planes on it, and I spent some time looking at them before I started to draw. I did a quick preliminary 5-minute drawing just to try and work out the planes of the head to see if I had them correctly, and I didn't quite have them as accurately thought out as I liked, and I made some adjustments with this one. So here I am trying to kind of consider exactly where the planes of the head go, and also exactly where to position the eye, because the eye is not straightforward to see in the shadows of this. That was my first attempt at the eye, and then I pushed it back a bit, and then I kind of made it a bit dark and less distinct, and I think that helped. And then also trying to work out how the beak fits in, exactly how the feathers on the head curve around the beak and at what point. And so now I come back to doing more of the hatching to create the 3 dimensions, and I do want to allow some sense of the black and white, but in 5 minutes I'm just not really going to have a chance to do that very well. So now I decide to push the tail back further. Probably made the tail at the point where it joins a little too wide. You can see I was trying to just get a sense of the proportions of the back half of the bird in relation to the front half of the bird. And again, this is where it's tempting to try and draw feathers, but if I did, I'd be drawing more from my mental picture, my memory of a feather, probably a fairly cartoony feather. So I resist the urge to start trying to draw feathers, and instead I go back to just drawing an effect of what I can see. And so I do end up with fairly strongly defined planes, but I think these give a better sense of 3-dimensionality of a real bird. And now the shadow is really important. Put this shadow on the grass and to get a sense of grass, to have context, and also because the bottom of the legs are hidden. And so we do want to indicate that they're hidden so that the proportions still seem okay, that it doesn't look like we just haven't finished the bird. I may yet do a longer drawing of a bird for one of these videos because I have enjoyed the few that I have done. I really do like birds, and we're surrounded by them where I live, so I think they are a challenging but enjoyable subject. And so here's my 5-minute, fairly gestural drawing of a bird. What do you think? Are you going to have a go? The photo, of course, will be on my channel community page. So I'm just strengthening some of these darker values, reflecting both the local colour as well as the shade on the bird that's being cast by the sun. A little more sense, a few minor adjustments to the head, still redefining planes. If it's not right, work on it. Get some of these darker shadows put in. And I'm pretty close to done. This is actually 1.5 times speed. This did take me 8.5 minutes, so this is the longest of my 5-minute drawings. But I really did just want to work it at that little bit more. Our second 5-minute drawing exercise subject is this, well, I think of it as a stone gazebo. It's a fairly historic structure locally to where I live, made of some of the local stonework about 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago. Now, it's a fairly simple shape. The challenge in a 5-minute drawing is actually to capture a sense of the detail of all of these stones. That was the real challenge, and I must admit I struggled a little bit more than I thought I was going to do to both establish the outline adequately and then to have time to suggest the stonework. Now, this drawing you are watching me draw in real time. It took me just over 6 minutes to draw. So it was perhaps a more regular length of time for these 5-minute drawings. I seem to take 6 minutes, just over 6 minutes to do most of them. Now you can see the one thing I'm avoiding doing is actually drawing any straight lines, because there are no straight edges to this. This really is all texture. It really is all jagged stone, and the surface is a very rough ends of stone. So how to do that when I have just 5 minutes is my challenge. I did think if I'd just drawn it slightly smaller, it would have been just a little easier to do in the very tight time frame. Scale is very important when we're doing quick drawings. If we draw them too large, it simply just takes longer to physically drag the pen over the greater areas. However, smaller scale does make it more challenging often to, if you like, condense the effect of the detail in a credible way. So 6 of one, half dozen of the other, but this is the size I did anyway, slightly larger than my original. Now again, I'm hoping that if I invest a little more time drawing a little more of this central detail more carefully, that I can get way more gestural in way less time when I come to draw the rest of it. So particularly this central archway, I'm just changing a few of my proportions on this arch to the left. I took it up too high, but fortunately that's not a problem, because I can hide those lines in the top of these edge-on stones lining the arch, providing the structural support. So I think I'm probably 3 minutes in at this point. I don't know, it was every time I looked at the timer on the camera, it just upset me. So now I'm working out how little can I get away with, and look how loose the edges are of these rounded surfaces. So there really aren't any straight lines horizontally anyway on the building. There are obviously some vertical straight lines, but these are all cylinders within a cylinder. Actually, no, there is that decorative, if you like, capping on the top of the pillars between where the pillar ends and the arch begins. So I'm just trying really hard at this point to suggest, and I'm thinking I better get the rest of it drawn in as well, trying to get the shadows done. I'm still hoping to almost make 5 minutes. I was hoping not to crack over the 6, but I did in the end do that. And I'm looking at this thinking, gee, I didn't even get to do a bit of shadow under that cornice that came out. I really barely got back to that. I did a very, very slight indication of the top of the rounded ceiling, which I'm sure must be reinforced. I don't think that is supported just by the actual stonework. Now I'm doing the far side, the arches and columns of the far side that we see mostly in fairly strong shade and shadow. And this is the detail that really brings it together, makes it look three-dimensional. So very quick line work here, trying to be very gestural. And probably looking at the time while I'm drawing this part. And then trying to work out, dare I go a fraction longer and just add a bit of context. I do want to put the shadows that are on the ground, and I decide I'll at least put a line across the back to define where the ground ends against the foliage, just to again make it look not quite so much as if it's floating in space. If I'd had another minute I was going to spend, I would have given some indication of the foliage behind. However, with such light gestural line work, that may have risked overwhelming what I've drawn already. And so now just getting these shadows. It's just a beautiful little structure. It originally actually was an aviary. It involved birds being held in there. What do you think? Are you going to give it a go? G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Look, I hope you enjoyed these two subjects. It just occurred to me that we had a bird as our first subject and an aviary as what was once an aviary as our second. So look, I hope you give it a go drawing. You'll find the photos on my channel community page, of course. But look, whatever you draw and however you draw it, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.